I'm Jeremy Wade, extreme angler and freshwater detective.
Fish on!
For years I've been tracking down creatures that are normally hidden. Large or small, it's their ability to inflict lethal damage that interests me. And now, from the heart of Southeast Asia, come reports of an unseen mutilator that's leaving a trail of disfigured victims. But what animal could possibly be behind these attacks?
He just bled until he died.
To find out, I'm heading to a place that suffered unimaginable horror, and to a river that harbours more than its fair share of monsters. It flows like the Amazon of Southeast Asia, a huge river whose waters are still yielding animals new to science. Rising on the Tibetan plateau, the Mekong River slices down through Indochina and into a country that for many years was off limits to outsiders. Cambodia was once at the heart of a powerful medieval empire, an empire whose overgrown ruins are covered with images of freshwater giants.
These carvings at the centuries-old temple at Angkor show fish so big they can swallow deer whole, and so plentiful that boats can't avoid bumping into them.
And it's from these monster-filled waters that I've heard reports of a creature that's mutilating both bathers and fishermen.
There are multiple cases, but one story is particularly gruesome. A teenage boy was checking his fishing net when he felt a sudden pain in his groin. Blood started gushing from the wound, and when he got out of the water, he discovered that he was missing part of his genitals. He'd been sliced as if by some kind of blade. The culprit, unseen.
The details are vague, but I've come across incidents like this before. In Papua New Guinea, the normally vegetarian pacu, introduced from the Amazon, became known as the ball cutter when it appeared to develop an appetite for human testicles. And I can't rule out the possibility of something larger. In Argentina, the golden dorado was guilty of a similarly gruesome attack on a young boy.
But as far as I know, neither of these fish nor anything like them is found in Cambodia. So I'm not sure quite what I'll find.
My investigation begins in Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh.
I've arrived just after the Cambodian New Year. 39 years ago, New Year was marked by the arrival here in the city of the Khmer Rouge.
It was the start of one of the bloodiest mass murders in recent history.
Over the next 4 years, well over 1 million people died, around a quarter of the country's population.
Wherever I look, there are grim reminders of that brutal period.
I'm seeing people here and there with missing limbs. Now, these people are probably the victims of landmines.
During its time in power, the Khmer Rouge buried untold numbers of these explosives. Unfortunately, many of them are still in the ground, especially in the rural areas where I expect to be going. This is Phnom Penh's oldest market and a clearinghouse for fish from right across the country. I'm here to see if I can spot anything that's equipped to slice through human flesh.
So this one? Okay, right. No, I just asked her the name of the fish and she just tells me the price. I recognise this one. This one's still alive. This is a snakehead. They've got quite a bite on them, but those teeth, they don't slice. The action is more like a saw. When the fish shakes its head, that will cut through flesh. It doesn't slice.
The injuries I've heard about were clean and surgical.
Not one of these I'm looking for.
There are certainly things here that can bite,
What name this one?
but nothing that looks like it could inflict a sharp, knife-like wound.
Is there any big animal here with teeth? He says there's crocodiles here. Now, crocodiles have immensely powerful jaws, but their teeth rip and tear. They don't really cut.
I look instead for a lead to anyone who might have been attacked.
Do you know any story of any person being bitten in the water here? She says the only fish that she knows about that will bite people is the snakehead. That's all she can tell me.
The market has provided neither suspects nor victims. Yet it's clear that most of the fish here come from Cambodia's more remote backwaters. So if I'm going to find the culprit, I need to leave the city and head upriver. Though Cambodia is new to me, I have been on the Mekong before. Further upriver, I had an experience I'd rather forget.
I'm always a little bit uneasy in the remoter corners of this part of the world. It was on this river where it forms the border between Thailand and Laos that I was arrested as a suspected spy. I actually had to leave the country as quickly as possible. That happened in 1984, and it's a very different place today, but even so, I still find it very hard to get completely comfortable in this place.
These waters are more treacherous than they look. Whirlpools can whip up in an instant, and anchoring in the strong current is next to impossible. Our only option is to tie up to one of the concrete channel markers that stick up like tombstones. In this water, any predator is likely to be lying deep and using the current to its advantage.
Right, this actually feels quite good. There's water rushing by on either side. There's a very dramatic drop-off. It goes from about 12 foot down to 60. It's the kind of place where fish would come in expecting food items to settle in the current.
To make sure my line sinks in these fast-flowing waters, I need to attach a lot of weight, so I'm improvising with some lumps of scrap metal.
With a bit of luck, that will hold bottom. I'm attaching that to a relatively thin bit of line so that if this does get caught up on anything, what will break will be this and not my main line. This feels good.
The bait is on the bottom. It's in the kind of place where a predator might be waiting.
The water's too deep and too murky to see anything, so fishing is the only way I can find out what's down there.
I'm told, as well as fish, there's unexploded bombs in this river. Nobody quite knows how many, nobody quite knows where.
It was during the Vietnam War that thousands of tons of explosives ended up in the Mekong. And it's entirely possible that live bombs are still littering the riverbed beneath me.
That's something on, that's something on.
Whatever's attached to the end of my line, it certainly feels heavy.
I wonder if it's a stingray. I'm wondering if it's a stingray. Yeah, it's coming up, whatever it is. Whatever's on the end is about to break the surface.
In Cambodia, I'm on the hunt for a creature that's been mutilating bathers and fishermen. And I've hooked something big from the bottom of the Mekong.
It's coming in, whatever it is, it's coming in.
A river that's peppered with unexploded bombs.
Whatever's on the end is about to break the surface. It's a tree. It's a tree. I have actually caught trees before, but I have to say it's probably the first time I've been pleased to see that that was all it was on the end of the line. There's unexploded bombs scattered around. One of those came and happened to go off. I could lose an arm or a leg, or even worse.
I continue fishing the river, but with the same frustrating result. The strong current is constantly sweeping debris along the bottom and into my line. I hook branch after branch, but not a single fish.
This bait is completely intact. Nothing has gone for this at all the whole time it's been in the water.
It's unusual to fish for so long without getting anything. With this stretch of river seemingly empty of fish, I need to switch tactics. Maybe if I can track down a victim, I'll pick up a clue that'll help me identify the unseen attacker.
Do you know any cases of anybody being attacked by something in the water? Nothing here. Nothing here. Okay. All right. Thank you.
The Mekong is an aquatic highway that connects hundreds of riverside communities, and information spreads rapidly up and down its banks. If there have been attacks nearby, the chances are that somebody will have heard about them.
Hello.
I've asked river people all over the world about tragic accidents, but I feel uneasy doing so here, where over 1 million people were systematically murdered by a cruel regime. Eventually, a man named Mr. Lung tells me about his brother. His brother was out fishing with a friend close to their village and managed to spear a fish from his boat. But when he tried to retrieve it, something in the water attacked him.
When he came back up, his face was streaming with blood on one side. Then when they actually got him back into the boat and cleared everything up, part of his ear had been completely removed.
I'm struck by a particular detail, one that's consistent with the other stories I've heard. His brother's butchered ear looked as though it had been surgically sliced with a sharp blade. Mr. Lung's account is confirmation that these waters are home to an animal that cuts through flesh. But what is it? There is one avenue I haven't yet explored. Often, local knowledge is enshrined in folklore. Perhaps there are clues buried in the mythology of this ancient land. Buddhism is central to Cambodian culture, and it also has an intimate connection with nature. If anyone has special knowledge of the river's inhabitants, it may be the local monks. In this riverside temple, dragons, multi-headed cobras, and all manner of strange-looking beasts stare back at me from every wall and pillar. Could one of them, I wonder, have any connection with a real flesh and blood creature? When I ask Brother Teng Vuti, he describes an animal from the river that does indeed have a nasty bite.
Kantier?
Kabal,
Kabal?
Kongkab,
Kongkai?
Kongkab.
The local name means nothing to me, but bizarrely, I'm told that they actually keep one of these mysterious beasts right next to the temple. According to Teng Vuti, the creature's bite is powerful enough to crush bone or remove a finger. So our barefooted approach seems nothing short of reckless.
feel something under them. It's here.
In Cambodia, my search for a mysterious river monster that's been mutilating fishermen has brought me to a Buddhist temple decorated with strange beasts. And one of the monks now wants to show me an animal that can apparently crush bone
It's here.
and chop off fingers.
Right, I can see nothing at all.
When the monk reveals the beast, I recognize it as something I've tangled with before. A massive, soft-shelled turtle.
It's very similar to one that I saw in India, and that one nearly took my hand off. So I'm being quite wary with this. It's got very sharp claws.
But it's the beak I've got to watch. It's made up of razor-edged blades, and a turtle's bite really is strong enough to break bone.
It's almost like bolt cutters. I mean, you really wouldn't want to get anywhere within range of that at all.
This Cambodian species can grow bigger than me, but even a small one could inflict a crippling wound.
So this thing, you'd never know it was there. It'd be very easy to blunder into it. And if you came within range of that mouth, it could do some serious damage.
However, the very reason turtles are kept here tells me that they can't possibly be the animal I'm after. This is actually a breeding program aimed at saving the species from extinction. The fact is, these turtles are now simply too rare to be behind the multiple attacks I've heard about. Which means I'm still looking for a suspect. This is turning out to be one of my most perplexing investigations. Few rivers have proved so unwilling to give up their secrets. But I'm not about to quit. And the monk's efforts to save the turtles have given me another idea. There's a place I know where I can quickly get a look at what else is lurking beneath the Mekong's murky surface. It's a lake across the border where not one, but many of the Mekong's monsters are protected. I want to see if any of them could leave the signature wounds of the mysterious attacker. It's barely 5 minutes before something bites one of my baits.
Something's on the float.
And from the way it's taken off, I can tell it's big.
Every time it comes close to the surface, it takes fright and goes down again. There it is.
This is only a small one. Siamese carp are said to grow nearly 10 feet long and reach over 600 pounds.
Just hoping the fish stays calm for a second. There we go. It's got a very upward turn mouth, this fish, so no surprise that it took a bait in the middle of the water column.
It's got plenty of weight to throw around, yet its rubbery mouth is completely toothless.
So no way that this could slice through anything or anybody. Just a really... what I was going to say is a really pretty fish.
This vegetarian lacks the hardware to make it onto my suspect list. I'm upping my game. Maybe a shower of meaty-smelling fish pellets will tempt a flesh eater onto my line. It's another bite, and this beast feels much bigger than the last one.
It's going the entire length of the lake.
To keep the line clear of snags, I have to get in the water.
It's heavy. It's not wanting to show itself. I keep thinking it's nearly ready, and then it just goes off again, off again.
Could this heavyweight, perhaps, be the Mekong's mysterious mutilator? Previously on the Mekong, I was arrested as a suspected spy. What did the police confiscate and never return? When police in Thailand arrested me as a suspected spy, they took and kept all my film, including photos of the biggest fish I'd ever seen. I'm on the hunt for a monster that's stalking Cambodia's Mekong River, slicing chunks off fishermen. After a week of searching, I've yet to come up with a suspect. But in a lake where the Mekong's largest fish are protected, I'm hoping to find a beast that fits the bill. And something big has just taken off with my bait. As long as my feet are firmly planted,
Okay,
I'm not in danger.
I'm going to come back a bit.
But one more powerful wrench on my line, and the fish has the advantage.
I'm just touching the ground.
It takes 40 minutes of back-breaking struggle before I start to gain the upper hand.
Can't see the fish. That's the fish on the surface.
This is one of the biggest freshwater fish on the planet.
Large Mekong catfish. Very hard to hold up, very heavy, but also just incredibly powerful. I can't think of any other fish this size which is this powerful, and one of the reasons is this huge tail here, but it's also all the muscle that powers that. And there were a couple of moments I thought I might go under and be towed into the middle of the lake.
Mekong giant catfish can grow to well over 600 pounds, but there's no way this fish is capable of tearing into a human.
I can't see any teeth, and if I put my hand in there, there's nothing at all. So although this took a very strongly flavoured fish bait, which is quite unusual for one of these, which is normally herbivore, vegetarian, there's no way this can cut or slice anything or anybody.
Despite its size, this giant is no more a suspect than a toothless carp or an endangered turtle. I fish here for a further 2 days, but it becomes apparent that this lake has no more clues to offer me. The only way to move my investigation forward is to track down a victim on the Mekong. I return to the village where Mr. Lung's brother was attacked and start working my way upriver.
Do you know anything about anybody in the water being bitten by anything?
I know there's something here that bites through flesh. But what is it? And where on this river can I find it? My perseverance eventually pays off.
You're saying it's down.
Yeah.
Although this man has not been attacked himself, he gives me the name of someone who has and tells me where I can find him. The victim is a young man named Sok Heng, and he lives in a slum area known as Kandal. A lot of people in this area live on less than $1 a day, and it's not often that outsiders show up. I'm not sure if I'll be welcome. But when I find him at his family home, Sok agrees to tell me his story.
So can you tell me exactly what happened to you?
Listening to his account, it soon becomes clear that this must be the very attack that brought me to Cambodia.
It was just outside the back of the house here, and he was wearing a sort of a wraparound, bit like a sarong, a thing called a krammer.
Many fishermen wear krammers in the water, but they leave the flesh beneath exposed and vulnerable. Sok was checking the nets that he'd set alongside a floating house when he felt a sudden, sharp pain in his groin. It was only when he got to the hospital that he discovered the horrifying extent of his injury.
He says it was a clean cut, no ragged edges at all, and it actually cleanly removed part of his testicle, and it happened in a fraction of a second.
Sok did not see his attacker. It vanished as quickly as it had struck.
Whatever this was, it just bit him and then disappeared.
I retrace Sok's footsteps down to the river's edge.
There's just so much stuff in the water. There's weed, but there's also branches, there's old boats, there's cable.
The trash-strewn attack site immediately starts to shape my thinking about the perpetrator. To infiltrate these congested, debris-filled waters, the attacker must either have been small, like a piranha, or possibly snake-like. Anything bulky would quickly get caught up in all the nets and other obstacles. So what could have cruelly emasculated the boy? Fish don't have to be huge to inflict serious damage. The red-bellied piranha, arguably one of the world's most voracious freshwater predators, is proof of that. Could the Mekong's unseen mutilator also be something small, but equally savage? I've come out to slightly deeper water, where I'm hoping to fish without getting snagged.
Right, I'm pretty certain that what I'm after is not particularly large, so I'm not having to use very heavy gear here. However, if it is capable of slicing through flesh in the way that I've heard, then that would make very short work of normal fishing line, so I'm using wire next to the hook, basically similar to what I'd use for piranhas, and it shouldn't be able to bite through that.
This time, I know I'm in the right place, but the river still refuses to offer anything up. In the end, it's not the water, but my boatman, Ko Sen, who provides me with the crucial lead I'm looking for. He tells me about an animal that's been slicing his fishing nets clean through.
This is actually quite strong material. It's almost like it's gone through with scissors or clippers, something like that. Something very sharp. It's not torn, it's cut.
He then brings out something that I wasn't expecting. The skeleton of one of the very fish that's been shredding his nets. Its identity is unmistakable. This is a freshwater pufferfish. Named for its ability to puff itself up when threatened, it has a deceptively friendly appearance. It is, in fact, one of the world's most poisonous animals. The paralyzing toxins in its body are deadlier than cyanide and can kill a person in just 20 minutes. But to get a lethal dose, you'd have to eat it. Until now, I never thought this fish would actually go for people. Yet, looking at its jaws, I can see how it could cut chunks out of a much larger animal, piranha style.
Although this is quite a small specimen, this apparatus here is really serious.
Its four blade-like teeth come together like a miniature guillotine. Kosen tells me that his nets were shredded not here, but in a distant lake called Tonle Sap, where the waters are apparently swarming with pufferfish. By now, word of my investigation has spread, and before I even leave the slums of Kandal, I'm approached by a man named Sam Ao, who has a story of his own to tell me. He vividly recalls being attacked by a pufferfish when he was a child.
This is when he was about 14 years old, and he was with a couple of friends in the river here.
As he ducked under the surface, the fish struck his face without warning.
He's bled a lot. His father came, stopped the bleeding, and he's practically blind in that eye now.
He goes on to tell me about another, much more disturbing attack. I can only hope I'm not the next victim. On the Mekong River in Cambodia, I'm on the trail of a creature that has apparently been mutilating people for decades. And my investigation has led me to a surprising culprit. Like the voracious piranha, the tiny freshwater pufferfish punches well above its weight. Sam Ao's right eye bears the scars of a childhood encounter with this fish. But he knows of an even more serious assault.
I thought being bitten on the eye, being practically blinded, was bad, but this was a Vietnamese man who was in the water.
He had gone to check his fish traps when something unseen sank its teeth into one of his legs. Though he made it to shore, the blood loss was so severe that he bled to death.
He says he actually saw the body, and what's interesting is his description of the wound. A clean wound that must have just gone so deep that it went through an artery.
My guess is that the bite actually severed the victim's popliteal artery, which runs behind the knee. From the injuries, witnesses had no doubt that his killer was a pufferfish. And in this case, it was the fish's teeth, not its poison, that proved fatal. Sam Ao confirms what the boatman has already told me, that the best place to catch these fish is at Tonle Sap Lake. Connected by a channel to the Mekong, Tonle Sap is the largest natural lake in Southeast Asia. In the wet season, it swells to over 4,000 square miles. The huge quantity of fish here makes it vital to millions of people. More than 3/4 of the country's inland catch comes from this one lake, which is known locally as Cambodia's beating heart. And it's not long before stories of pufferfish attacks are coming thick and fast.
He says not only are they here, people are getting bitten, they're getting bitten all the time. On average about 5 people a day, and he says in the last couple of months, this particular season, about 100 people.
Almost every household I visit has suffered from the attentions of this prolific mutilator.
This man has a very ugly wound on his arm. He said it happened just 10 days ago.
He says he literally had to tear the pufferfish off. This lake appears to be plagued by these serial attackers, and for the people here, there's no escape. Their survival depends on getting into the water. And every time they do so, it's a gamble whether they'll emerge unscathed. Maybe it's here that I'll finally be able to tempt one of these baby-faced killers onto my line.
Well, there's no interest in my bait at all. The thing is, I know they're down here. People have been bitten in just the last few days, but they're not going for my bait.
I've been assuming that all the attacks I've heard about were attempts to feed, to take a mouthful. But maybe these fish only bite in self-defense when they're disturbed.
And if that's the case, I can probably sit here for as long as I like, and I'm not going to catch anything.
It seems the only way I'm going to see this animal is to hook up with some locals and fish with a net. These people are all too familiar with the pufferfish menace. When I ask, they agree to let me join them for the rest of the day.
This guy, he's just shown me what looks like a very fresh bite. Sometimes they bite through the net. If you're handling them and you're not very careful, they'll bite you. They're in the process at the moment of just paying out the net. One of the 2 boats just pays that out in a circle, and then gradually they'll gather that in. And the bit that I'm interested in is seeing what has become concentrated in the middle of that net.
The pufferfish aren't the only things around here that bite. These murky waters are teeming with aquatic hunters.
We have a snake in the net. That was actually underneath my feet. I could actually feel something moving at some point. I just assumed it was a fish.
It's at this point that something unpleasant dawns on me. Retrieving the net requires getting into the water. In the snake-infested waters of Tonle Sap, I've joined forces with a family of fishermen. I'm hoping to see a fish that's been busy biting chunks out of people here. But to stop our net from snagging on submerged branches, it's necessary to jump in. And it's become clear that I'm not here just to watch.
I didn't actually realise that this was going to be part of the deal. Sign language, I was just told, get in the water.
If, as I now suspect, the pufferfish are biting in self-defense, then corralling them in a net is just about the last thing I should be doing. I'm starting to wonder if I'll be the next victim.
Something just got me, something just got me. I don't know what that was. I think that could have been a catfish spine or something.
With the net freed from snags, it's time to haul it in and find out what we've caught. There's a huge variety of fish, but only one of them interests me.
This is something different. This is something different. This is the fish, they tell me, that's been biting people here.
Behind its harmless appearance, this pint-sized animal packs some vicious weaponry. This is not a fish to be trifled with.
Just being very careful here. Just hoping it doesn't move suddenly. But I can see very clearly now those mouth parts.
Now that I've got one, I want to test its bite.
Oh! That was a very graphic demonstration. That's almost cut that fish in half. It's actually gone through the backbone.
This fish has a piranha-like ability to slice off bits of flesh in the blink of an eye.
And looking at that triangular wound, I'm left in no doubt that if any part of me were to touch those jaws, it would just slice clean through.
And this one is not alone. In just 20 minutes, we've pulled up dozens of them. It's all adding up. You rarely find pufferfish in the market. Because of their deadly toxins, they're left in the water, where they're multiplying unchecked. There are now swarms of these potentially dangerous fish, swimming right under people's feet.
From everything I've heard and now seen, I'm left in very little doubt that a bite from a pufferfish can be every bit as severe as a bite from a piranha.
The Mekong, it turns out, is a minefield in more ways than one. You never know what your next step could bring.